our good friend from the NFL on CBS and Westwood One. Ian, good morning.
Hey, DA, good morning to you.
How many different countries have you called NFL games in?
Oh, do you consider NFL Europe part of that or no?
I do. I absolutely do, yes.
Oh, many. 5.
So, yesterday, I don't think any of us thought that the Giants would end up beating the Chiefs. When you sat down and spoke to players and coaches for the Giants on before this game, Friday, Saturday,
Yeah.
did you feel as though there was any juice in the building to try to get a W?
No, I can't say that I walked out of there feeling as if this team is overconfident and they're going to turn this season around. I will say, in talking to Eli Manning, you wouldn't know if they're 1-8 or 8-1. He is so consistent in his demeanor, and his message, although you would expect it from him, was very clear that it's still about Sundays. There's still something to play for when you have 7 games left in the season. He has reiterated that to the players on his team, and word is there was an impassioned comment and speech from Manning before this game started. And I know that we don't see him in that manner, but I think the players do because of what he's accomplished in this league and the gravitas that he brings just by his presence. But no, there's nobody on our crew that walked out of the Giants facility and said, hey, this is going to be a huge upset on Sunday.
So it's such a black eye for the Kansas City Chiefs, who are trying to keep pace with the Steelers and Patriots. Offensively, they could do nothing yesterday. What was the key? Why couldn't they get off the ground offensively?
Yeah, I think looking back on the first 5 weeks where everything clicked for them, big plays, chunk plays, running game, dominant, Kareem Hunt, who really was supposed to be a backup this year. Spencer Ware was the guy, but Ware goes on IR and Hunt is forced into primetime play, and he delivers. Not week 1, not just week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. It kept building for Kareem Hunt. But since that point, this team has now dropped 4 of their last 5 games. They're quite flawed on offense. All of those big plays that we saw, it's not something that's coming easily to them. So when we talked to Alex Smith about it, his feeling was, hey, look, I know there's going to be comparisons to what we were first 5 weeks to what we are now. And his feeling was it's not fair because things change. The defenses you play change, adjustments are made. The problem is they're not making the adjustments. Kansas City hasn't had the answers, and it's not as if it was just this game. It's going to be glaring because it was against the New York Giants, but their offense has sputtered now for an extended period of time. The assumption, just looking at the numbers from Andy Reid, well, he always figures out a way. Give him an extra week of preparation, the off week, he's going to win 16-2 prior to this game coming off the bye. Well, that's a loss, and a desperate Giants team needed to feel good about themselves, and now it's Kansas City in this wacky, weird NFL season where nothing seems to compute. It's Kansas City scratching their heads trying to figure out exactly how to get back on track.
Ian Eagle joins us after calling Chiefs and Giants yesterday for CBS. You talk about how the Chiefs are a flawed offense right now. Do we have any idea why they're so flawed today, whereas in the first couple of weeks, as you mentioned, all the chunk plays and the efficiency was there and they looked anything but flawed?
Well, I think their running game is really where you have to look. The offensive line, which dealt with injuries to Morris and Duvernay targets, they were able to stay whole, yes, but they weren't standing out like they were in the first month of the season. And I think that affects their play action. Alex Smith, who up until yesterday had been having the best year of his career, and that's saying something because he has put up some solid seasons in his San Francisco tenure and his Kansas City tenure. But he had an 18 touchdown, 1 interception ratio going into the game yesterday. And the win may have played a role, but Eli Manning was dealing with the same thing, and Smith just didn't look like the dynamic leader he had been through the first 5 weeks of this season. To me, it is the running game. Everything fed off of that. You had to respect it, and now the Giants, who did a good job defensively, laid out another blueprint on how to stop Kansas City. And this is not a big-name Giants group right now, as we know with all of their injuries. So to do it in the way that they did it with the unsung heroes stepping forward. You mentioned it, Roger Lewis, with what turned out to be the game-winning play, more or less, setting up the Rosas field goal. He was not supposed to be a big factor this year. Well, we know the names that we're supposed to be, and it just shows you that in this league, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the name says on the back of your jersey sometimes. You make it to the NFL because you have ability, and as we know, on any given day, these things happen. For Kansas City, it's happening more often now, and that's what's troubling.
You had Titans and Steelers last Thursday, and the one thing with Pittsburgh is we know all of the talent that they have, but they can tend to be a Jekyll and Hyde team, sometimes playing down to the competition. If they are going to beat the Patriots, I would assume they need that home field advantage at some point. They got to beat the Patriots head-to-head and not stub their toe down the stretch here. When you spoke to members of the organization, did you feel like they had tried to figure that out, why they've had some bad games against bad foes, and maybe trying to turn the corner on that?
Yeah, I think it's been a topic of conversation. They got feisty this past week leading up to the Tennessee game, Roethlisberger in particular, because media, fans in that area, in that city, were questioning how they were winning games. And Roethlisberger's point is, hey, we're winning games. Don't worry about it. We'll figure out how to keep it going, but don't blame us for getting wins. And I don't mind that. I understand both sides of it. Of course, you're allowed to criticize, you're allowed to scrutinize performances, and the Steelers weren't doing it in the way that everybody thought they would. The offense was not nearly as prolific. It finally busted out. They scored 30 or more points for the first time this season. They scored 40 against Tennessee, a game Titans team that now has to look up in the standings in the AFC South, down a game to Jacksonville. I think that Pittsburgh has all the pieces in place. Their defense is generating more pressure than we've seen the last 5 or 6 years. It's a really good sign that they're getting to the quarterback, and they're finishing on defense now. Offensively, I wasn't that worried about them. I still believe that this team, when the smoke clears, will be among the better offenses in the NFL. So to me, it was going the right way for Pittsburgh. If you really analyzed it and looked at their games, that time would allow them to figure things out on offense. I do think they turned the corner. Doesn't mean that I'm convinced that they're going to beat New England come playoff time, but I would agree with you. If they have any chance, they got to have it at Heinz Field. That's the only way that this formula is going to work.
In that game that you called for Westwood, Marcus Mariota threw 4 interceptions. A couple of years ago, maybe even coming into the season, it felt inevitable. Both he and Jameis Winston would be superstar quarterbacks.
Yep.
Now they don't feel so much that way. Should we be worried about where the progression has been for Mariota at this point in his career?
Yeah, my concern would be more along the lines of him being healthy and being able to do the things that he's physically able to do when he's 100%. Because of the way that he plays, he's going to take some hits. He's going to take some chances. When he runs, that is a free play for the defense to do some damage. And that would be my only concern with Mariota. I still think he'll be a fine player in this league, but the way he plays is going to come under question as to whether or not he can sustain being out there over 16 games, and not just being out there, but being effective. So it's a double-edged sword. You want Mariota to be who he is, but he's got to be concerned with all the hits. Obviously, what we've seen with Andrew Luck this year, that doesn't come out of left field. That to me was building over the last couple of years. The guy's gifted, but because of his mentality, which you love, and it's part of the reason why he became the number 1 overall pick and a franchise quarterback automatically, is that he'll go for the extra yards. He'll stick his head in there. And in this day and age, when the commodity is the way that it is, money-wise, financially, and the salary cap in the NFL, you lose your starting quarterback, you don't survive. And we found that out, not just with the Colts, but with a number of teams. And that's my concern with Tennessee. I still think he's a really talented player. I think he's going to be a successful quarterback. There might have to be some tweaks there in how they design that offense and how they protect him.
Ian Eagle, our guest here on CBS Sports Radio. Final question. You had Texans and Rams last week as well for CBS. They take the loss, the Rams do yesterday, against a very good Vikings team, but we know that the Rams have turned things around. In your mind, what's been the secret sauce for the Rams' success this season?
Oh, it's all McVay, and I'm not saying he deserves all the credit, but he went in and changed the entire mentality of the organization, and you don't do that in one fall swoop. You don't just pull off a Band-Aid and hope it gets better. He brings a presence with him, and I think also the way the organization has handled it, the fact that Wade Phillips is the defensive coordinator, that Fossil stayed on as the special teams coach. They have split up responsibilities so it doesn't all fall on McVay Monday through Saturday. But on Sundays, his presence has definitely stood out, and the message that he sent to this team early. When we talked to Aaron Donald last week, the first question we asked was, after the holdout, you step back into the locker room, and did you feel as if this was a different team? And he said, absolutely. You could just sense the accountability that all the players felt, and Donald had not been around it as it was building, so it was a surreal feeling for him to come back. It was the same bunch of guys, and yet it was a completely different vibe around the team. I have to give credit to McVay on that, and I think building a really good support for Jared Goff has paid off dividends. Year one to year two. Think about what we were saying a year ago as Goff was beginning his first taste of the NFL. He just didn't look the part. And we draw conclusions very quickly in professional sports. We jumped the gun, a lot of us did, in stating that Goff was never going to live up to the billing. He has looked very good and comfortable this year. He's a young guy, and I think, again, McVay deserves a lot of credit for that.
Last note, I want to know where Iron Eagle's going to be emotionally on December the 15th when Mike Francesa wraps up his Hall of Fame career between 1 and 6:30 p.m. By the end of that, will you be staring out of a window pane longingly into the
yes.
into the mist, or will you be running out of your kitchen with the number one finger like Joe Namath into the corridor?
Yes, I will send you a selfie, DA. Just be ready on that day. It is quite a thought to ponder that that part of Mike's career is coming to an end, just considering how much he meant to New York radio, how much he meant to me on a personal level as an intern at FAN, and then behind the scenes, eventually making my way on the air and being part of the Mike and the Mad Dog show. He's a one of a kind. There's not going to be anybody else like him. There's no duplicating him. And the career will stand on its own. One of the greatest all-time radio talk show hosts that this vocation will ever see.
Agreed. Number one, they broke the mold, and that's going to wrap up kind of coming up here in a couple of weeks. Iron Eagle joining us here on the show. You watch him on the NFL on CBS on Sundays. You hear him on Westwood One on Thursday nights. Always good to catch up, brother. Thanks so much.
All right, DA. Have a great holiday. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
You too, my man. Iron Eagle joining us here on the show.